Hi guys, Ashley here. Today I'm bringing you one phenomenal guest, and we are having Brennan with us. He is the author of a new book which is called Attention Factory, the story of TikTok and China's ByteDance. He is also a managing director of China Channel. Matt, so great to have you on the show.
Hi Ashley, good to be on. Good to catch up.
For so many years you've been in mainland China. You've been watching Chinese tech. We know each other also for many years. You are setting up the largest English language conference about WeChat, and right now suddenly from WeChat focus you pivoted back to ByteDance and larger technology. So my first question would be, why ByteDance?
Yeah, well, why not ByteDance? But I started covering ByteDance as a competitor to Tencent, and using obviously Douyin in the China market had quite an impact for several years now. So I would say I started becoming a heavy user of their products at least 2 years ago now, maybe 3 years ago, and really trying to understand them as a competitor to Tencent. But the more I use their products and the more my friends started working there, and I've got several contacts across the organization, it just became clearer and clearer that this is really quite a special company. And yeah, right now it's really been a breakout global hit, right? So today it doesn't need much explanation. It's even in the time I spent writing the book, the story's changed considerably, and the interest has grown much further than I thought it would be, to be honest.
This is one absolutely phenomenal topic. Let's start from the very beginning. When we look into the book Attention Factory, the first thing that jumps from the first page is saying that I don't have affiliation with ByteDance. I wrote this book just by myself, so it's not sponsored by anybody else. And then you are basically, from the expert perspective, explaining the story of this company. So in just a few words, how did this company start?
Yeah, so the founder is Zhang Yiming, one guy, one founder, and he's a serial entrepreneur. So it's not his first company. He is, done things like Fanfo, which is a clone of Twitter before. He was in real estate app business also. He even worked for Microsoft shortly for about 6 months in Beijing. So he did many things before ByteDance, but the spark to start ByteDance was the rise of the smartphone, basically the mobile phone era in China. So around 2011, he was itching to do something bigger than the real estate market that he was already in and already doing very well. And so went into start ByteDance with a couple of friends. So he started in an apartment in Beijing, 2 apartments, really, about 30 people working at, just out of a converted apartment, cooking meals in the kitchen every lunchtime, every dinner, very small, very scrappy, typical, China startup, I guess you could say. And then they actually went into not really knowing what they wanted to do at the very beginning. In the early days, they made many apps, actually. They've about 15 different apps in 6 months that they built. They're all content-based, though. They did have a sort of clear idea that they wanted to move into sort of content space. And the one thing that Yiming did have in his mind that was super clear, and I think you could say is the sort of foundation of the company, the insight that led to ByteDance, was the power of recommendation. He sort of understood very, very clearly that recommendation would be very suitable for mobile, because on mobile we have a small screen, we have small fragmented time, and we have an information overload. And so whereas maybe the search engine is the a paradigm through which it's most convenient to find information on a desktop, a recommendation engine would be the most convenient way to match users with people on this small mobile screen. And that insight was what powered Toutiao, the news aggregator that they did. That's a household name in China, which unknown outside China almost, but everyone in China knows Toutiao. There's no real equivalent in Silicon Valley for Toutiao, unfortunately. It seems to be a model that's specific to the China market, and you could summarize it as being like the Facebook newsfeed without the friends, and because it is a newsfeed essentially. And they built the advertisement business on top of that. And then they only moved into short video from 2016. So actually before 2017, when Douyin broke out, the reputation of this company, where it was and where it is today, very, very different. It's like the company completely reinvented itself around short video, and in particular Douyin and TikTok, which today are the most exciting and dynamic and largest businesses they have.
And just now you mentioned Toutiao, and you've mentioned that this is also a very popular app in mainland China, but probably the model, the system, however it, the users that it targets, it just doesn't fit global scale. So why is that? And why something as simple as short videos? They were not the first ones to come up with short video app, right? Basically, sure. It's, I remember in the early days, people were saying that this is the video Instagram, right? It's like Instagram for videos, but obviously a completely different habit, right? So why something as simple as this app with funny people doing funny videos and, recommending you things that you might like suddenly broke out and became a global phenomenon?
Yeah, so you got two questions there, really, man. The first one about Toutiao is actually very deep. You can't answer it easily, but it's a fascinating question. Because that was one of the things I had in my mind when I was trying to write the book, is like, why is Toutiao so successful in China, but there's no Toutiao outside China? That doesn't make any sense to me. And it took me a long time to actually work out the answer, because I spoke to people and researched. There were some answers, but they weren't very convincing to me. Essentially, it comes down to IP, and the way that media works in China is actually completely different from the global standards. In China, state media, basically before the internet, let's say, right? The sources of information that people could have would be newspapers, television, radio, etc. They're all controlled by the state, and they're all quite boring, to be honest. So your options for entertainment and information are fairly standardized and limited.
There's no Fox News.
Yeah, right. Whereas in the West, or in other developed countries around the world, there's a very vibrant system, and there's brands built up, very, very strong, whether it's newspaper brands like the New York Times or the FT from London, etc. Like all over the world, most local markets have very strong local brands that are independent, privately owned companies that protect their IP. And similar for television, etc. Whereas China, everything really was starting very late. And when the internet came along, it was just this complete, wild west of information, in terms of people, firstly with Weibo, suddenly found their voices and came online, and KOL started to appear, but also online media started to appear. There was definitely regulation to try and for the regulators, they wanted to control this, but the area was just moving so fast they couldn't keep up. But what that led to was a sort of scenario where protecting IP online in China just was basically impossible. Today, it's actually much, much better. But back when we're talking about when Toutiao was founded in 2013, you couldn't protect IP of content on Chinese online, and that's the reality. And content was just copied and cloned and used everywhere. So that meant people, accepted that reality. But for an aggregator like Toutiao, it's perfect, because all of these sources are just sort of mixed together, and if no one can really stake a claim to content. So for them to aggregate all this is very powerful. Whereas if in the West, if they try to do the same thing, all the good content's protected. If you put up an article from Washington Post, they're going to sue you if you don't pay them, right? As an app, right? You've got to license everything. And some people want exclusivity and they want to protect their channels. So it's really, really complicated to do. And so that's the biggest reason. There's some other stuff as well around cultural stuff and how they promoted it, which was pretty smart as well. We go into the book about that as well. They're an excellent company for growth hacking. I think their growth hacking is amazing, and they've done with Toutiao, with pre-installs, they did some pretty clever stuff, and then even with TikTok. An
example of great growth hacking for specifically Toutiao?
The big one was app pre-installs. So ByteDance paid more money for app pre-installs than anyone in the whole of China, basically. And it was the big growth engine for them. And they put a lot of time and effort into optimizing to reach all of the Android devices they could online. So that's why their user base was so heavily tilted towards Android users and lower tier users, because their primary way of acquiring users was through app pre-installs. And for those who don't know, app pre-install, like in China, essentially it's a gray market. It's still around today, but much less. But there was a window of a few years opportunity in China where if you did app pre-installs, you could insert. So they put Toutiao onto phones after they left the factory, but before they reached the consumer, by cutting deals with the distributors along the chain. You can't do that in many other markets, but China you could. And so they found it was very effective, because as a news application, that's something that everybody wants. It's not like a game where you might use it for a while and then stop using it. News applications, if you build that habit, you tend to stick with it. And so for them, it was a really suitable way to promote themselves.
Lifestyle. Many people wake up and the first thing they do, yes, WeChat, they check whether somebody has messaged them or sent them money, but then right away they just go and check news. It's like reading, as you said, Washington Post and New York Times, right?
Yeah, and also what really helped with them is that WeChat, which is the big giant in the space here. We talk a lot about WeChat in the book because they are and Tencent, because and the competitive dynamics between the two companies is fascinating. But WeChat was very reluctant to go into the recommendation area, right? Their official account system was based around a subscription service. It was like subscribing to emails in a sort of inbox type fashion, which was totally different to what Toutiao was doing. Today, actually, they've shifted very, much. You have many news feeds in WeChat, and they've embraced recommendation quite heavily now. But for many years, they resisted. Alan Zhang didn't like it. So that's another big reason why why they were able to grow. Your second question was about
ByteDance. It's about ByteDance, not ByteDance, but Douyin. Why Douyin became an with short videos, nothing super special from the initial look, and suddenly it's huge in China, taking China by storm, and then before we know it, it's taking globe by storm.
Why Douyin? Yeah, that's a huge question that we dig into. So the conclusion we come to is that actually musically was pretty close to doing something very, very big, and actually had about maybe 60-70% of what they needed to actually become potentially as big as Facebook one day. But they missed the technology side of things. They just weren't, to be fair to them, nobody realized how powerful, if you take a truly best-in-class recommendation engine and stick it behind the musically experience, that combination together can be so powerful. But it really was, and ByteDance only worked that out in late 2017. The Douyin it wasn't like day one Douyin was a mega success. It wasn't even like after 3 months it was a success. It took almost a year for it to really kick in, and during the first 6 months it was pretty much a failure. They had like weekly meetings in ByteDance head office for Douyin back in the day, and Yiming, the CEO, stopped attending after a while. He was just like, this is, which says where it was going. It was okay. After a while, they worked out that they could position it as an app for art students and trendy urban youths, and they did campaigns around like Rap of China, which had just broken out about that time. Don't you remember 2017? Rap of China was huge, and hip hop culture had just broken in and become the hot new thing. And
they were sponsoring that hip hop show as well on TV. Remember, it was a big show, so they were sponsors. That's where they
were a big sponsor.
Visibility.
Yeah. So that sponsorship worked out really well for them, and they did cinema adverts, and they created a lot of buzz. But it was a very specific demographic, right? It was just for kids, and like actually, if you go back to the time and you can read some articles of like analysts and industry people writing about it, they're like, they've done a great job, but like, I'm not using this app. This is for kids. Like, it's too cool for me. So it definitely was not mainstream in that respect. That came in 2018. Later on, once they'd really broken, the recommendation had kicked in, and all of the metrics started to boost up heavily, retention rates and etc. And then, so 2018, they just spent a lot of money promoting it and advertising it, and that boosted up to about 200 DAU in China. Today, it's at 600, still growing. And so we haven't quite yet reached the ceiling on it, but yourself, in China, Douyin, it's pretty much a mainstream app. You can expect seniors to even use it, right? So everyone's on that on a daily basis, and it's hyper addictive. And we're seeing the same story play out outside China, right? It's really this echo that's happening with TikTok, and surprisingly very similar. Turns out that this experience can work all over the world.
And probably another thing that unites kind of the globe is that these young people, it always starts with extremely young people having fun. And it's like community. What I feel when people look at, let's say in mainland China, you look at Weibo, you look at Wechat, you look at Lord knows Facebook, it's like for old people. Youth feels that this is all for old people. My mom is on it. But when you talk about something young, really like, okay, TikTok, okay, my mom is not going to be jumping there in her pajamas, recording a video, but this is something so cool. So they feel, in my experience, an impression, they feel that this is kind of peer-to-peer community. When it starts, that's when it becomes super popular. And then people are just addicted. People go and like we see it in China, it's been 2 years. And those that joined when they were 16, they're right now 18, but they're still on the platform, right? So, and obviously this pandemic has also helped. So make people more and more addictive. Yeah. Let's talk about the users of Douyin in general. Do you think that this user base has potential to become productive for brands advertising on it? What I mean by that, do you believe that the e-commerce ecosystem that ByteDance right now is building, closing all of their apps, turning it into social media plus e-commerce checkout, is ever going to work? Because this is a big question mark. One thing is entertainment, but becoming an e-commerce platform is a completely different thing. So what's your take on that?
Would it ever work in China, or are you talking about Douyin or TikTok or both?
First China, okay. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this experience is ever going to supersede marketplace-driven e-commerce. I think it will just be an alternative, and it is an alternative already, channel that works well for specific types of products. You can't sell everything on there, but if you can do good demonstrations, and if you're in a certain category that's suitable for this kind of e-commerce, then yeah, it could be interesting. From what I hear, the sales tend to be very volatile, right? It's you've got sudden peaks of traffic and then nothing. So you've got to overcome that kind of barrier. But it could be. I think it will have its small place in the overall scheme of things. But I do, I feel this type of e-commerce, it's a discovery-driven experience, right? Where people are going there for entertainment purposes and to kill time and maybe to see their favorite KOL, etc. And so this is always, these types of purchases lend themselves to a certain price point and certain types of goods. But most people, when they're making serious purchases, they want to compare, they want to contrast, they want a serious e-commerce platform to do that. I think that psychology between those two buying experiences is the reason why this has its place. I believe in it, but I think it's going to be a niche part of the whole pie. Having said that, in the States, I think it's really just, and North America and Europe and other markets around the world, I think it's just getting going. And probably there's probably lots of opportunities for brands still to look at what's happened in China, which really is a window into the future here. The really, really nice thing about Douyin and TikTok is that the platforms are so similar that, with China stuff, you really have to squint and think out. It's one of the lessons here for me to learn, because outside China, I'm working on Facebook, I'm working with Google, and it's totally different. And so taking those lessons away from China and bringing them to the rest of the world is not direct, right? There's always some translation that needs to happen. And sometimes what happens in China stays in China. But here, we can be very confident that what Douyin's doing will appear in some form in TikTok all over the world, and that's exactly what's happening. And when you speak to the product teams, that's exactly what their product roadmap is to try and replicate this behavior. So if e-commerce isn't, you can look towards China and see what's happening there and take those lessons and quite directly start to prepare for that type of thing coming to your market through TikTok. I think is something that marketers can be fairly confident that this type of behavior is coming to our local market.
Absolutely. And that was very interesting how you mentioned right now the lessons from China sometimes can be translated into the rest of the world, and sometimes what happened in China stays in China. This year was a very unusual year. The whole COVID-19, obviously China recovering earliest, technology booming globally, be it businesses, be it household, education, shopping, working, etc. What are some of the lessons that you think the world can take away from China's recovery, if there's anything the world can take, or is the majority of its success to containing and proceeding with their life post COVID-19 to stay in China only and not travel outside of their borders?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely lessons to look back on and learn from. I feel it's just in most countries in the world, it seems to be like they've either right now there's what can they do, right? They're sort of where they are, and if there's you can look back and say we should have done things differently, but there's we've got to work with what we can do today. I'm from the UK, for example, and it's like they're having a terrible time controlling all of this. Given that the UK, I was never optimistic that the UK would be able to do what China did, simply because the way culture is in the UK. You can't order people around to do stuff. That's not how things work there. So it was never a case that they would be able to replicate the China model. I feel that was just certain countries are, and it's mostly cultural factors why I believe why certain methods can work in East Asian markets, but they won't be able to work in markets where the culture is very, very different. So we'll have to see, but I believe that next year should be much better, and hopefully we can return to somewhat of a global norm, especially around travel, because for everyone else and a lot of your listeners, I imagine, are like involved in China, but maybe not in China, and so it had been a big disruption for all of us, and fingers crossed we can get back to something like we were before. I mean there's a vaccine coming, so we'll have to see.
Fingers crossed. Another question that I have: you have been observing technology in China for the past many years. What are some of the most exciting things you see coming up when it comes to technology in China for the next 1 to 2 years? What are you watching most?
I would say, I mean, obviously the past 3 years, it's probably been this story of short video, and that's been the big story. Moving forward now, I'm less convinced on live stream e-commerce. I know it's definitely a thing, and it has its place in the market, but I feel it's been a bit overhyped, to be honest. I don't think it can sustain. I don't think it can sustain the level of interest that it's currently got. Alibaba has a way of promoting things for a year or two and then moving on. New retail and now live stream e-commerce. There'll be another thing they hype up. So, we'll see. But it does have its place. I'm not writing it off totally. I think there's definitely for certain, it definitely adds a sort of experience, especially during the lockdowns and COVID. I think it added a lot to the e-commerce experience when people were at home. But there's nothing grabbing me right now. I mean, there's a lot going on with IPOs coming out. Kuaishou's IPOing. Ant obviously was IPOing, but now isn't.
On hold, as of
suddenly.
we're speaking right now, as of now, it's still on hold.
Yeah, that's quite a story. And from looking into it, it does seem to be that it was Jack Ma's speech that did it, which is quite incredible. And ByteDance itself is going to IPO. I think there's enough there.
When is it going to IPO? Is it public?
There's rumors. I mean, there's been rumors for 3-4 years
now. Yeah.
But they do seem to. Right. I mean, that's what I've been telling people who've been asking for quotes and stuff. Like, I was like, we've heard this for 3-4 years now. Like, this is like the 100th rumor. But this one does seem to be gaining strength. It could be possible. I mean, certainly we'll see them do something. I mean, they have to break out TikTok into a separate company. I feel. I think it's going to happen. That's pretty obvious that's going to happen. It's just how. And so that in itself is a big move, and how much ownership ByteDance retains of that company is a big question. And then they'll IPO, I imagine, in Hong Kong with the China assets. Because the rise of ByteDance has pretty big implications on the whole Chinese internet ecosystem. We haven't seen the end of this; it's still playing out. Maybe short video which is the cash cow, obviously is maturing quite clearly, but you can see that there's second order effects that are going to be playing out for 3 to 5 years here as ByteDance continues to expand in gaming, in education. These are areas that they're really starting to make big commitments in. And then just the whole ecosystem with how it works with traffic and kingdoms, ecosystems, right? Before we had Tencent and Alibaba being the ones that basically and Baidu getting in there, but a little bit smaller. Now you've got this another B, right? You've got ByteDance, going in and growing, and so you're going to see the dynamics return to sort of a three kingdoms type thing where the balance of power will be split between these three big guys. So moving forward, that's going to create some interesting dynamics. I think it was a little bit like with just Alibaba and Tencent dominating everything. It was a little bit
boring,
less interesting than at least when Baidu was in the mix. Now you've got three guys, and it's sort of like it's going to create a more interesting dynamic for new deals. And when new things when breakouts happen, now you've got three players all fighting it out. And of course, there's other players in the mix. Not to write off all the Pinduoduos and Meituans and all the other big players in the market. It's actually very vibrant. So I'm sure that there'll be plenty more. There's nothing. There's no boring moment in China tech, or China digital marketing either. So it's just a matter of keeping up. That's the trouble, right?
Absolutely, I'm 100% with you on that. Before our wrap up, I have a few very short questions where you just need to pick one of the two options, okay? So it's going to go like this. Chinese e-commerce, Alibaba or JD?
Pinduoduo?
That's a second question.
But what is in terms of what? Just there's no context.
No context. Just
no context.
Just your pick.
Alibaba or JD? Okay, I'll go with Alibaba then.
Alibaba. Okay. Social e-commerce, Pinduoduo or Kuaishou?
I'll go with Kuaishou. Yeah.
Tech war, USA or China?
Oh, it's got to be China, right?
Social media, Wechat or ByteDance?
Oh, it's got to be
Tencent.
Wechat, Tencent, but I'd still stick with Tencent for social media. Yeah.
Ecosystem, Alibaba, Tencent, or ByteDance?
Ecosystem, Tencent. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect, Matt. This is super awesome. Now, tell us more about the book. So the book that you've just published a couple of weeks ago is called Attention Factory, the story of TikTok and China's ByteDance. Where can we get the book? Who shall read it? And shameless plug of your book.
Sure. Well, the book's available on Amazon for paperback and Kindle right now, and we'll get distribution next year for some, offline for bookstores, and translations as well are in the pipeline. It's sorry, hang on, I lost my train of thought.
Who is it for?
Who is it for? There we go.
All those awesome people that are watching China, working in China, doing marketing, e-commerce.
Yeah.
Tech companies as well, right? Somebody who wants to learn from the market. Tell us.
I think this book, I wrote it for myself, basically. That's what we could say. But it's for for business professionals, for digital marketers, for people who are really passionate about technology, for investors. I think all of these groups would gain a lot of benefit, and already have. We've got some great feedback, and people have reached out. So far, the best feedback's been from ByteDance people themselves. The book seems to have been like really well received, or it's not officially endorsed by ByteDance, and we don't expect that. But we know for many people have reached out and said, this is quite accurate and good job, etc. And so that's the best indicator right now that it is worth reading. It does have its place in the market. So.
Absolutely, and it is 400 pages of pure awesomeness. And I'm not being paid for this promotion, so I'm also an independent person saying that it is a great book. I've checked it out, guys. So if you haven't read it yet, definitely check it out. Available on Amazon. Also connect with Matt on LinkedIn and follow his updates. He is active on LinkedIn, Twitter, and many other social media platforms. Matt has been watching China, living in mainland China for many years, watching tech sector. He speaks, reads, writes Mandarin Chinese, and again, one of the most phenomenal and involved people in the China tech scene right now. Yay, Matt, thank you very much once
I just
again.
realized my glass says Heineken.
Yes, I saw it. You're flashing. I don't know. It just looks very...
It looked like I've been drinking beer the whole time.
Yeah, he was okay. Flashing it the whole interview, basically endorsing Heineken there for free. Guys, this episode is not sponsored by Heineken.
If they want to pay me, go for it.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you so much for an interesting chat. Looking forward to more of your books to come real soon, and all the best with this book's launch and success globally.
Thank you, Ashley. Pleasure to be on.
Thank you so much, guys. Stay tuned for more China Experts to come.